Washington, in for Shannon tonight. We begin with live Fox team coverage. Trace Gallagher looking at what will happen if the president declares a national emergency. David Spunt examining what the Democrats are planning for Michael Cohen. But let's kick it off tonight with Kristen Fisher on the latest from the White House and Congress, where bipartisan talks to try to get the government open and build the wall fell apart. That may have opened the door to this more dramatic action from the president. Good evening, Kristen.
Good evening, Ed. And you know that these negotiations are not going well when Senator Lindsey Graham says that he's never been more depressed about finding a way out of this shutdown. That's a direct quote. Up until the early afternoon, he was hopeful that this grand bargain he's been working on might do the trick. But then President Trump killed it. Now Graham has given up on finding a congressional solution and is urging President Trump to go ahead and declare a national emergency at the border.
I always said it would be the last resort. We're there. There's no pathway forward that I can see, so the president believes he has this power. Seems to me the only way left is for him to exercise that authority. I don't see any action in the Congress.
But Democratic Congressman Chris Coons is calling that unwise advice.
I think for the president to use emergency powers and our armed forces to construct a border wall is not a good precedent to set. And I suspect if the president listens to that advice, he'll end up in court fairly quickly, and I suspect he won't be successful.
But President Trump remains convinced that he does have the legal authority to declare a national emergency. The White House counsel's office has been looking into it for several days now. Administration officials have been trying to build the case for it all week. And then tonight, President Trump said this as he was finishing up his tour of the border. He said, quote, "We have the absolute right to declare a national emergency, and this is security stuff. This is a national emergency." He went on to say, quote, "If we don't make a deal with Congress, most likely I will do that. I would actually say I would. I can't imagine any reason why not, because I'm allowed to do it. The law is 100% on my side," end quote. So the big question now is, if President Trump does declare a national emergency, where would the money come from to build this wall or barrier? On this trip to the border, President Trump brought the commanding general of the Army Corps of Engineers with him, and the White House press secretary has now confirmed that the administration is asking him to find ways to fund it from the Army Corps of Engineers budget. That means that the money could come from a nearly $14 billion disaster relief fund, money that was meant to help California after its wildfires, and Texas, Florida, and Puerto Rico after the hurricanes. And already the Puerto Rican delegate to Congress is calling that possibility unacceptable. But what's unacceptable for the roughly 800,000 federal employees impacted by this shutdown is that tomorrow they'll miss their first paychecks, and that is going to really ramp up pressure on the president and Democrats exponentially, Ed.
Both sides on the line tonight. Kristen Fisher,
Indeed.
Appreciate that report.
Thank you.
So what happens if the president declares a national emergency to build the border wall? Our correspondent Trace Gallagher is on the case for us tonight. Good evening, Trace.
Good evening, Ed. Even though senior aides are cautioning President Trump that declaring a national emergency and using military budget funds to build the wall could have negative ramifications for the White House, the president says the declaration remains a top option. And by most accounts, it would immediately be challenged in court. But the more legal experts look into the fight over the border wall, the more they conclude the president could very well win. Even CNN's liberal legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin acknowledges the president's emergency powers are broad. Watch.
As a purely legal matter, it is hard for me to imagine the courts finding a plaintiff with standing, that is, the plaintiff with the legal right to sue, to stop this at any, at any early point in the process.
The Washington Post went a step further, saying lawyers who think an emergency declaration would be unconstitutional are also hard-pressed to say exactly who would stop the president. For example, the Supreme Court could, but that might not happen until after the wall was built. The Post also notes that presidents have been moving money around for years, and that a little-known code governing the military allows the defense secretary to undertake military construction projects in times of emergency. Others argue it would come down to the president's definition of emergency. The problem is the National Emergencies Act doesn't offer a definition. The most plausible legal challenge might come from someone who is actually harmed by the wall being built, meaning their property is taken through eminent domain. One woman whose land sits along the Rio Grande told the Associated Press she would not take $1 trillion for her land, and environmentalists also warn of how dangerous the wall would be to some species. Listen.
Uncle Sam is going to impact that dramatically by eliminating all of these trees full of nests, eggs, baby birds, piling them up somewhere and burning them.
In the end, Congress could also move to block an emergency declaration, but finding a veto-proof majority would be a very tall order indeed. Ed.
Absolutely, Trace. Thank you for that report. The president, meanwhile, standing firm, telling our very own Sean Hannity a short while ago he's not changing his mind.
Look, we're not going anywhere. We're not changing our mind because there's nothing to change your mind about. The wall works. It's not a question like, well, maybe it won't work. It'll work 100%. What we need the barrier. If we don't have a barrier, if we don't have a steel or concrete barrier, we're all wasting a lot of time.
Joining me now, the Lieutenant Governor of Texas, Dan Patrick. He was on the border with the president today. Good evening, sir. We appreciate you coming in.
Yes, Ed. Good to be with you.
Let's start simply. What did you see up close? We can talk about this in TV studios. We can debate this in Congress, but you were actually at the border. What did you see? What do you want our viewers to know tonight?
Well, Ed, I've been there many times, and I think it's great that the president was there today, and the testimony, in essence, he heard from those, including families who have lost loved ones to violence against their loved ones by illegal aliens, the economic impact. But when the president actually went close to the border and realized that, and people think this is a big river, the Rio Grande. It can be sometimes in raging waters and storms, but you can walk across it many times. Many of the families just walk across. You can throw a softball across many parts of it. And here's the deal. This is a national emergency. I'm not a lawyer, but I also have talked to many lawyers who believe the president has this power. I totally support this if Congress does not work with him, because it is a national emergency. It's a manufactured cover-up, Ed, by the Democrats that this isn't. When we apprehended 500,000 people on the border last year, we get 1 out of every 5, so another 2 million came in, plus the drugs, plus the violence. This is a national emergency.
Well, real quick, on your point about it being a national emergency, I read the transcripts closely, not just of what you and the president and the senators there said, but one of the Border Patrol agents told the president that at that one stretch where he was on the southern border, they have arrested people from 41 countries. So when Democrats say it's just Honduras and Guatemala and people are not coming from the Middle East, they came from places like Pakistan, sir.
Yeah, we track it every week. I can tell you, I haven't seen this week's report yet, but last week we we apprehended 24 people from China, from Brazil, all over the world, and we have documented, and it's now public, 15 people from countries of interest where terrorism is bred, and we know we have many more in classified documents. This is real. This is a national crisis. It's a humanitarian crisis, and this president is right. And we're with him all the way in Texas. We need the wall built. 2
quick questions, sir. The news of tonight. So first of all, this idea that the Army Corps of Engineers may use already appropriated money, billions of dollars in disaster relief funds, that could come out of money that not only was intended for Puerto Rico, but your state of Texas. Are you okay if people in Texas do not get some disaster money in order to help build the wall? Yes or no?
We have good senators, and we have a great president. We'll get money for both. And I'm not concerned about that. He will take care of us on the hurricane relief, as will Senator Cornyn and Cruz, and we will get the money to build the wall. One quick fact, Ed, to put this in perspective. 4 or 5 miles from where the president was standing is the town of Reynosa. 1 million people. They haven't had a police force for 5 years because the drug cartels have threatened them all. It's gunfights in the streets every night. That's what's 4 miles away from American soil. We need a wall to keep the violence out, particularly in the Rio Grande Valley, where about half of the people who came in last year to America illegally.
Last quick question. Legal standing. Will there be, there's a question about whether there'll be a legal challenge to the president declaring a national emergency and moving forward with Army Corps of Engineer funds, and to get legal standing, the people who are landowners in your state who are saying, as you just heard in Trace's report, we don't want a wall built. I won't sell my property for $1 trillion. What do you say to people, citizens of your state of Texas, who say, don't build the wall on my land?
First of all, we had people there, landowners, who want the wall on their land. You're always going to find someone who's against eminent domain, whether you're building a road. Any time government tries to take land, someone's going to say, you can't take my land. We will offer a fair price. If it goes to court, it goes to court. But we have 1,200 miles. We already are ready to build 22 miles starting in February, and those have already been taken care of.
All right.
You're always going to have someone to object, Ed, but we will win in that case in the courts as well. And again, this is a national emergency. We have 25 to 30 million people here illegally, about 8 to 10% of our population. This is a national emergency, and the president is right.
Lieutenant Governor,
everyone was there, the majority supporting him today.
Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick giving us very direct answers. We appreciate you saying that.
Yes, sir.
And coming out tonight and making some news. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Also breaking tonight, the president's former fixer, Michael Cohen, has agreed to testify in public before the House Oversight Committee, which is now run, of course, by Democrats. Our correspondent David Spunt is on the case tonight. Good evening, David.
Hey, Ed. Good evening. Michael Cohen will head to the Capitol on February 7th. Now, he's been there before. He admitted to lying to members of Congress. Democrats now in control of the House are looking to shift the focus from the FBI and Justice Department directly to the president. Michael Cohen will head to Washington early next month, and late today he made it clear he's ready to appear before the House Oversight Committee. He said, quote, "I look forward to having the privilege of being afforded a platform with which to give a full and credible account of the events which have transpired." Now that Democrats have the House majority, they've invited Cohen to testify about a myriad of topics involving President Trump. Cohen is heading to prison in March for tax evasion, campaign finance violations, and lying to members of the House and Senate about a proposed Trump Tower project in Russia. House Oversight Committee Chair Elijah Cummings, who invited Cohen, downplayed the upcoming testimony to Fox News.
Our first hearing is with regard to H.R. 1, and we'll also have a major hearing with regard to lowering prescription drugs. So we're going to be pretty busy. So the Cohen hearing is just one of three hearings that we've announced.
Cummings' Republican counterpart on the committee, Jim Jordan, said in a statement, quote, "Chairman Cummings promised to pursue rigorous, responsible, fact-based oversight. However, the chairman's announcement today suggests he will be using the committee as a venue for political theater rather than legitimate oversight." The president on the U.S. border in Texas today was asked about Cohen's upcoming appearance.
I'm not worried about it at all.
But members in the majority brush off the word theater and promise cold, hard facts.
It certainly opens a window that we haven't had the opportunity to hear from him. When you think about over the last 2 years, we've had very little oversight over this administration, so this is probably just the crack in the window that starts the process of real oversight.
The president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, told Fox News today Cohen is, quote, thoroughly discredited liar. Ed.
All right, David, appreciate that report. Let's bring in the ranking Republican on the House Oversight Committee. You heard from him there, Congressman Jim Jordan. Congressman, appreciate you being here live.
Be with you, Ed.
So what's your direct reaction?
First big hearing the Democrat Congress has, they bring in a convicted felon. I mean, think about this. This guy's going to prison in 2 months. First big hearing, and he's going to prison. Why? Because he lied to Congress. And that's your first big witness? I mean, if this doesn't underscore the fact that they are totally focused on getting the president and not on doing what's best for the country, I don't know what. Remember what happened a week ago? What's the first thing Brad Sherman, congressman from California,
talked about? Articles of impeachment.
Impeachment resolution. Yeah. Remember the statement from the person who hadn't even been on the job for 24 hours. Yeah. The terrible things she said about the president. So this just seems to be where they want to go. I think it's just shows they're not focused on what's best for the country.
On the other hand, to be fair to Michael Cohen, what he says and what some of the lawmakers are saying is, look, he made a mistake. People make mistakes. He lied previously. He's trying to make amends now, Michael Cohen, and come to grips with his life and tell the truth. This happens to people.
For a year and a half, we have tried to get to the bottom of what the FBI did when they took one party's opposition research document, dressed it all up, made it look like legitimate intelligence, took it to a secret court to get a warrant to spy on President Trump's campaign. And all these hearings, all these depositions we've had, we start to ask questions about that. Oh, can't answer. The FBI lawyer, the DOJ lawyer said, no, the person can't answer because it might get into Mueller's investigation.
Right.
And now, who are the Democrats bringing in? the star witness from the Mueller investigation. I mean, you would laugh if this wasn't so serious.
So, right. Now, Elijah Cummings, I want to be fair, here's what he and other Democrats said today about how they insist they're not interfering with Mueller's probe. Watch.
We're going to make sure that we do absolutely nothing to interfere with the Mueller investigation. That is very, very important to us.
I don't want to make a representation on behalf of the special counsel. We will obviously be in consultation with special counsel about his testimony before our committee. But we need to get a full accounting of what took place.
It sounds like the key part of what Adam Schiff there said was, we will be in consultation with Mueller.
Even Chairman Cummings' statement says we're in the process of talking to the special counsel. I mean, look, I said in these depositions, Mark Meadows, myself, Maga, a number of us said in these depositions, we would ask legitimate questions designed to get at the facts, not about them all. And they would say, no, they can't answer. So now you're going to have their star witness in an open hearing. I mean, look, I don't see how they get through that. The other thing that bothers me about this, too, is, you know who we need in front of the committee? You know who we need in for a hearing? Rod Rosenstein. 3.5 months ago, it's reported in all the mainstream press that Rod Rosenstein said to subordinates he was thinking about wearing a wire to record the president.
Maybe invoke the 25th Amendment. And he kept saying, I can't testify, he doesn't have time, he's busy.
But add to this fact, when we did have James Baker, former chief counsel at the FBI, we asked him about Rosenstein's statements and what he heard from people who were in that room. And James Baker, FBI chief counsel, said he thinks Rod Rosenstein was serious about those two statements. And we sent a letter yesterday to Mr. Cummings. We want Rod Rosenstein to come in. We haven't heard from him about that, but we got a big press release today about Michael Cohen, a convicted felon, coming into a committee. You got to give me a
Congressman Jordan, we appreciate you coming in on short notice with some breaking news. Thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you.
Did CNN's Jim Acosta just accidentally prove that border walls actually work? Acosta is getting mocked across social media for a video. In his defense, Acosta is tweeting that if the barrier he reported on today works, maybe there's not a crisis as the president claims. Our panel's here to weigh in, fair and balanced. We'll give both sides. Plus, one lawmaker is giving back donations from Ed Buck. He's that Democratic donor whose apartment has been the scene of 2 untimely deaths. And later, are some top Democrats being anti-Catholic? That's been the charge for Republicans. But what's new tonight, a senior Democrat in the House is warning it looks that way. The intra-party Democratic war over religion and politics. Coming up. For the border barrier comes with some risks, according to Republican Senator Marco Rubio. Check out what he had to say today.
Today, President Trump may use it to do something we support, but 8 years from now, we may have somebody else do it for something we do not. And somebody could say there's a national emergency out there on guns, and it could lead to some executive action without Congress being involved, or climate change, or anything else.
Time now for tonight's Power Panel. Former Chief Counselor to the House Judiciary Democrats, Julian Epstein. The White House correspondent for the Daily Caller, Sagar Enjeti, and the former Deputy Assistant Secretary over there at the Department of Homeland Security, Lauren Claffey. Good to see you all tonight.
Good to see you.
Lauren, it seems like Marco Rubio made a fair point for Republicans. You were just working for Kirstjen Nielsen recently. This could boomerang on the White House. The president could get what he wants on the wall, but it could open up a can of worms.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the president's going to have to be very specific if he's going to be using this act in order to declare a state of national emergency. Generally, this provision is used for things like, there's 30, I think, or over 30 that are in current existence right now. They're used for things like sanctions, countering foreign powers. Most recently, his administration did one around countering foreign actors for securing our election systems, right? So they're more broad and foreign policy, national defense oriented. This would be a unique use for this provision, and I agree with Rubio. I'm a little concerned that it might not be the best precedent to set, and also I'm not sure which statutes that he is going to actually use in order to make the case that he should have this power.
Sagar, on the other hand, this is a president who has a political objective here, which is that he promised he was going to deliver on the wall. He's facing a recalcitrant Congress. Does he have to get it done one way or another?
Increasingly, the White House looks at this and they say this is the only way that we can deliver on this promise if we're going to get it done in any time in this first term. With the Democrats that are in power, we've seen, I think, 3 or 4 different offers that the White House has given over to the Democratic leadership. They've said no to every single one. They have to face a choice of either keeping the government shut down for months and months and months, or pursuing, the national emergency and building the wall with military funds.
Julian, as a Democrat, you can weigh in on that, but I also want to give you something something else, which is Senator Chris Murphy, a Democrat, tweeted this. Hey, Republicans, someday soon there will be a Democratic president. And once you open the national emergency bottle, the genie doesn't go back in. Bet you could bring a single-payer healthcare system faster, build one, than a wall with Mexico. Just saying.
And all the strict constitutionalists, when Obama did the deferred action on DACA, they were all claiming that the president doesn't have that authority. So I think Republicans are in a fix. I think Lauren states the case quite well. It's not just Rubio that's saying, and a number of Republicans are saying that the president is on thin ice here. And I think the reason that he's doing it is, frankly, it's the weasel way out of this debate. I'm not sure it would be upheld in the courts, but he's losing the public debate here. He just lost a midterm election where he made immigration the primary issue. Polls are showing 15 to 20 points that he's losing this debate. Republicans are starting to crack on Capitol Hill. And a lot of people think this is just insincere politics. Republicans had the Congress for 2 years. They didn't appropriate a single dime for a wall or a border fence or anything else. He's now shifted his position to a steel fence or steel slats.
But doesn't that show he's trying to meet them halfway? Well, I wanted to give you a chance to make your point. Democrats haven't moved an inch. They haven't offered him $1. He says, look, I'll do steel. I'll do whatever you want. I'll meet you halfway.
I think there's two reasons, to be perfectly honest. One is Democrats smell blood in the water. They're winning this debate, and they know they're winning the debate, and they're not about to start conceding when the president has tried to rub this issue in their nose in the election and now. So he's politicized this issue when immigration shouldn't be political. We would all probably agree that border security is absolutely vital. We should have zero tolerance for illegal immigration. We're complete agreement on that. But the question on the wall, I mean, if you look at people like the Cato Institute and others, the leading Republican thinkers and conservative thinkers out here are saying the wall is going to solve a small part of the problem. You want to really go after this problem? Visa overstays, employer sanctions. Well, become an ally with Mexico, not an enemy. You know why?
The president says he wants to do a whole bunch of things in Congress. And you're right, Republicans, when they ran the House, didn't do a lot of this stuff. Democrats blocked. Let me really quickly drop in, and I'll give everyone a chance to weigh in. Jim Acosta posted this video. He's a CNN White House correspondent who sparred with the president. He was trying to make the point that there's not a crisis, but he might have made an opposite point. Watch.
And here are some of the steel slats that the president's been talking about right here. As you can see, yes, you can see through these slats to the other side of the U.S.-Mexico border. But as we're walking along here, we're not seeing any kind of imminent danger. There are no migrants trying to rush toward this fence here in the McAllen, Texas area. As a matter of fact, there are some other businesses behind me along this highway. There's a gas station, Burger King, and so on. But no sign of the national emergency that the president has been talking about. As a matter of fact, it's pretty tranquil down here.
The president himself trolled Acosta a little while ago on Twitter, Lauren, because he's saying, well, wait a second, isn't it tranquil, as he says, because there's a fence there?
Yeah, I have a couple points on this. First, everyone seems so confused why we would want a see-through barrier, and that is because you want to be able to see the people across. I mean, a lot of the times, of a concrete wall...
So Border Patrol knows what's on the other side. They're not throwing grenades.
If somebody's throwing something or they're ramming the wall or what have you, they want to be able to see. That is a direct request from Border Patrol. So one, that myth. And second, just dealing with this whole idea that barriers don't work. Barriers do work, but they work in the right areas. Not the entire southern border does not need to be covered.
Right. Different pieces. Quickly, Sagar.
Yeah, I would never disparage a colleague, but I don't think
you seem to be enjoying this one, Julia.
You made the point he wanted to make.
I think walls can work. They're part in strategic places, as Lauren says. It's part of the reasons that illegal border crossings have gone down 90% in the last 50 years, last 15 years. I beg your pardon. Right. So they can work, but there are other things that Democrats and Republicans ought to be coming together on. Like I said, visa overstays.
Who would have thought Jim Acosta may bring everyone? Jim Acosta may help the president bring everyone together. That's a great way for us to end the panel. Julian, Sagar, and Lauren, appreciate coming in.
Thanks, Ed.
Democratic lawmakers are facing calls of hypocrisy over the issue we were just talking about, the border wall. We're digging into their evolving position tonight. Plus, a very special parent is coming up. His name is Don Rosenberg. His son, tragically killed by an illegal immigrant. We'll get the perspective of a man now on a mission to hold lawmakers' feet to the fire so that his son's memory will never be forgotten. Of a partial government shutdown. Many Democrats are facing calls of hypocrisy, though, for opposing a border wall or barrier that they once supported, at least before President Trump was in office. Our correspondent Peter Ducey takes a look at what you might call an evolving position from Capitol Hill.
2 years before being elected president, a politician still shaping his future platform warned about the dangers of a porous border. Think it could only be Donald Trump? Think again. It was Barack Obama.
The bill before us will certainly do some good. It will authorize some badly needed funding for better fences and better security along our borders.
The next standard bearer for the Democratic Party even bragged about border barriers.
Look, I voted numerous times when I was a senator to spend money to build a barrier.
The top Democrat in the Senate right now, trying to negotiate out of a shutdown, once said that progress looks like
630 miles of border fence that create a significant barrier to illegal immigration.
A lot's changed.
Democrats believe a border wall is an obtuse public policy.
In 2006, prominent Democrats like Schumer and Clinton and Obama voted for 2 layers of reinforced fencing in the Secure Fence Act. And in 2013, all Senate Democrats voted for a bill including 700 miles of fencing and technology.
What changed for you between back in 2013 when all the Democrats supported a measure that had 700 miles of border barrier?
What was the rest of that? What was 2013? Massive, comprehensive, broad immigration reform.
Independent Angus King voted for it too, but today wants more details.
I want to know what's actually being proposed. How many miles, location, eminent domain, non-eminent domain.
Democratic Senator Bob Casey, another yes in 2013, says one thing can get Democrats willing to back a beefed up border.
We should have lots of discussions about border security. You got to open up the government first.
Part of the reason the Senate couldn't pass the bill with border wall money in it at the end of the last Congress, they couldn't convince any Democrats to vote yes, even though out of all the Democrats and independents that voted 5 years ago for hundreds of miles of new border barrier, 34 of them still work here. Ed?
Thanks, Peter. The president sending a message today to federal workers who won't receive their paychecks. Responding to a shouted question from a reporter, he basically said there are some other people interested in this debate who are suffering actually a lot more pain.
You know who has more human pain? The parents of people who had children killed by an illegal immigrant that should have never been in the country. You know who has more human pain? The husband that lost the wife, or the wife that lost the husband to an illegal immigrant that came in 5 or 6 times that shouldn't be here. That's the human pain.
Let's bring in the co-founder of a group called Fight Sanctuary States, Don Rosenberg. His son was killed in a hit and run by an illegal immigrant. Don, good evening. We've spoken before, and we don't want to minimize that government workers may be suffering financially. But as you know better than I do, losing a paycheck is nothing compared to what you lost, sir.
Yeah, hi, Ed. Thanks for having me on. Well, absolutely. I mean, I don't want to be callous about, the dilemma that they have not getting paid. But in a couple of weeks, they'll have their money. I'll never have my child. And neither will anybody else who's lost anybody. So you can't even put the two in the same, you can't compare the two at all.
Now, we go back and forth in these political debates on that very point. You just heard Peter Ducey lay out, Barack Obama was for a barrier, then all of a sudden maybe not so much. Same with all these Democratic senators now that Donald Trump has been elected. There's these political games going on. But you as a father who lost a son, it's not just watching a debate. It has to get you in the gut. What goes through your mind when you watch those sound bites from years ago where they swore they were for a barrier?
Well, I'll tell you, yesterday was my son's 34th birthday, or should I say would have been. Mm-hmm. And, I spent a good part of the day, we would watch the president speak the night before, and then I was watching a lot. And I usually handle this, I think, pretty well. I was a wreck yesterday because listening to these people and watching, I'll tell you, I was watching a lot of MSNBC because I wanted to see how they handled it. And you've got people laughing and mocking that when he was talking about how, people have been murdered and had their heads cut off. And maybe that went a little bit too far. But I'm watching some of the panelists and they're laughing and mocking me. And not just me, but of course everybody who's lost somebody. So it's just outrageous. It's mind-numbing.
It is.
Who knows?
It's outrageous.
Who knows what to thought.
It's a gut punch, I'm sure, to you. And the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, said something to the effect, well, these are anecdotes, essentially like data points. These deaths of your son and others. And there's something else that Democrats have been saying. They've been saying that this is not a real crisis. I quickly want to play what they're saying about whether it's a crisis or not and get your reaction.
He manufactures crises like immigrants seeking legal refuge
on our borders.
This president just used the backdrop of the Oval Office to manufacture a crisis, stoke fear, and divert attention from the turmoil in his administration.
No crisis exists, and anyone making the argument is most likely guilty of fear-mongering and willfully misleading the American people.
The president's manufactured crisis reaches into the lives of millions of Americans. It threatens services and benefits they need to stay healthy and secure. It robs hardworking Americans of their paychecks.
Don, they're saying this is not a real crisis.
This has been a crisis since President Reagan signed Mazzoli-Simpson Act, or Simpson-Mazzoli Act. It's just nobody has cared to do anything about it. Since that time, you've probably had over 50,000 deaths, a couple 100,000 rapes, literally millions of crimes, about $2 trillion taken out of, Americans' pockets, and they're saying it's not a crisis. Yet when those 2 children died, which was a horrible thing, that was a crisis. So, it's really shameful. I don't know what else. I don't know how to describe what it is. I would just like to be able to talk to some of those people in person, but of course they don't have the guts to talk to me. They refuse every time.
Don,
and
Don, you've made your point loud and clear, and we grieve with you, especially as you mentioned, it would have been your son's 34th birthday yesterday. We're very sorry for your loss, but we appreciate you coming in to make sure that his legacy, his memory lives on.